Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting for November 20th, 2024. Before we get started, I just want to thank the team for a well-run and productive public comment hearing last night in the Black Hills rate case, and thank the Canyon City community and elected leaders for hosting us and for a productive dialogue. With that, Commissioner Plant, any preliminary remarks? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I am ready to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Gilman.
I would also vote to approve the consent agenda.
As would I. 24V-0477 EC.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nate Riley with Transportation Staff. On November 1st, 2024, the petitioner, Travel Paradise Vacations, filed a petition for a waiver of Rule 6305, Luxury Limousine, as it pertains to a 2024 Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid with approximately 3,010 miles. The waiver was requested from July 1st, 2024 through July 1st, 2025 for a period of 1 year. The petition was noticed on November 24th, 2024, and no interventions were filed opposing the waiver. In support of the waiver, petitioner states that Colorado has shut down all NEMT transportation, making carriers engaging in this type of transportation revalidate their status, which has put a hardship on their business. Petitioner also states that the value of the vehicle in question is over $50,000. Petitioner submitted multiple photos of the vehicle, which shows both the interior and exterior. The vehicle appears to have a sleek black exterior and comfortable interior seating arrangement, including leather seats and a captain's chairs configuration in the middle row. Petitioner also submitted a bill of sale document from Douglas County, Colorado. According to this document, the underlying vehicle was leased by Avis Budget Car Rental LLC to LeCaisor Lynette Davis, identified as petitioner's designated agent according to commission records, on April 30th, 2024. The value of the vehicle is listed as $54,620 on this document. According to the Chrysler website, a Pacifica model is classified as a minivan. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'm prepared to move on to the recommendation.
I guess I like the prior one. I'd probably grant the waiver request. I just think Colorado is underserved and more is better. And maybe I'll go to you first, Commissioner Gilman. You've been dealing with this longer and may want to present an alternative viewpoint, and then we can turn to Commissioner Plant.
I wish I had something really enlightening to say. It's kind of the issue that will never go away. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think there's a lot of limitations on transportation options that may not be serving the public in the best way that we can. We have rule language on the book that says a minivan kind of in at large is not a luxury limousine. So I struggle with these each time because I, like you, do believe that the state would benefit from more transportation options, and this likely artificially limits that. But it is still a rule on the books. So perhaps if we do intend to allow these this time and in the future, we just go ahead and address that rule as well.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah.
Our day started with
deja vu all over again. But yeah, I mean, I'm of the mind that we waive the rule and relook at the rule. I just think it's pretty, to say, something is classified as a minivan, therefore it's not a quote unquote luxury limousine. I mean, these terms are all very ambiguous. There was a time when limousine meant this big, long stretch thing. But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about trying to get people around, and, sometimes a minivan is the most practical way of doing that. And, so Yeah, I'd be inclined to waive the rule, but I do think we need to address this in a more comprehensive way.
I guess if you're okay with it, Commissioner Gilman, we just do an ABC decision reflecting sort of our joint concern that the rules need updating and that you would be inclined to deny the waiver. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I think that's fine. And then at some point we'll have to have a discussion about if we actually go ahead and address the rule. You know, what I don't dislike. I have nothing against minivans. Very practical, very practical mode of transportation. I have an issue with somewhat arbitrarily waiving or not waiving the rule, and so to me, probably the rule is more the problem than the minivan. And so, you know, at the same time, I think we recognize like the luxury limousine category, for better or for worse, is somewhat the more flexible way to enable and allow, you know, a broader set of transportation to serve people in the state, which I think is probably a good thing for people in the state for that to be interpreted more broadly. It's the arbitrariness that gets me. And so perhaps the answer here is that we actually finally address that rule.
So I think, Mr. Riley, you got a 2-1 ABC decision and a request to see if we can't address the underlying rule and get a better standard for defining luxury limousines. Does that give you what you need?
Just to clarify a few things, and just very quickly on Commissioner Gilman's point, yes, we are in the process of drafting a NOPR that's going to cover Rule 6305. So I think we're still exploring how we may want to modify that, but I think we can take some cues from what the commissioners have said in some of these recent petitions. But I can go ahead and include some language on the intent to explore that rule further. That's going to be coming up. We're actually in the process of drafting that now. So to that point, but to the matter at hand, so if the commission has found that good cause has been shown to waive Rule 6305 in this particular matter, the commission decision should also include that a copy of the decision shall be maintained in the vehicle in accordance with Rule 6107B, and that the vehicle is required to pass and keep in the vehicle a copy of an inspection in accordance with Rule 6117B. Also, the decision should probably, just based on how the petition was filed, the decision should probably clarify the time period that's going to be granted. Since the starting point of the waiver period as requested was July 1st, which was more than 4 months before the waiver was even filed, the commission may want to consider granting the waiver for the requested year-long period, but to be effective for when the decision is issued. Would be my comment there.
Commissioner Plan, is that okay with you?
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Gilman?
No issue.
I agree as well. Does that give you what you need, Mr. Riley?
Just to clarify, Commissioner Gilman, you're dissenting?
On technical grounds, not in spirit. So I guess that's a yes.
Understood.
Yeah.
Would you like me just to make a footnote of that, or would you prefer to make a more formal?
A footnote is fine, but it does not have to be strenuous. As I like to see everyone playing by the same rules. So if the rule is wrong, that's what we address.
Understood. Yes, I think I have everything I need. Thank you, commissioners.
And I think we have now a new category of dissent. Technical, not strenuous, which may come up later today. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Proceeding number 98M-236T, Ms. Ray, Ms. Ruitt, Colorado High Cost Support Mechanism.
Good morning, commissioners. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good. Good morning. Megan Ruitt with your telecom staff, joined by Gladys Ray. Before you this morning are two parts. The first being the 2024 Colorado High Cost Support Mechanism, CHCSM report that is due to the General Assembly on or before December 1st of each year per statute 40, 15, 208B. The second part is the proposed High Cost Support Mechanism 2025 budget. The legislative report contains contributions collected through the rate element assessment of 2.6% by each telecommunications provider and the total amount of the CHCSM from which distributions are to be made for the following calendar year. Since 2015, the PUC has allocated $97.1 million with estimated fourth quarter 2024 in CHCSM funds to support rural broadband deployment. As of January 1st, 2024, the broadband deployment account will be allocated 100% of CHCSM surcharge contributions, less basic service support to the 12 rural providers, and less administrative costs. For the year 2024, the total surcharge contribution amount is projected to be $19,226,229, which would be approximately $606,666 less than the total annual amount contributed in 2023, which was $19,832,895, or about a 3.1% decrease. This compares to an actual decrease of 2.5% for collections made in 2023. Distributions to basic service providers were $4.72 million in 2024, including fourth quarter 2023. Distributions to the Broadband Board are projected to be $13.1 million for 2024. PUC administrative and third-party contractor costs for 2024 are estimated at $163,697. Gladys Ray will discuss the proposed budget for the fund for 2025.
Good morning, Commissioners. House Bill 23-1051 extended support to the 12 rural providers until September 1st of 2024. In May 2024, the Colorado General Assembly enacted House Bill 24-1234, which removed the previous expiration date, allowing the Colorado High Cost Support Mechanism to move forward indefinitely. With that, I can share the proposed 2025 budget. Contributions are projected to be approximately $19 million annually, or $4.75 quarterly based on the 2024 collections. Distributions to the 12 basic service providers are to remain at $4.7 million, and distributions to the broadband funding with the transfer to the Broadband Deployment Board are projected to be $13.2 million for 2025. Administrative costs, which include our third-party contractor and the PUC for 2025, are estimated at $246,200. I can pause for any questions or proceed with the recommendation.
If you can give us your recommendation, that'd be
Thank
great.
you. Staff recommends that the Commission issue the 2024 CHCSM report to the General Assembly due by December 1st and approve the 2025 high cost budget.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision approving the budget and the report to the legislature. So thanks to the both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 23A-0632G, Ms. Shula, Ms. Dundas.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jessie Shula of your advisory staff. Before you this morning is a decision about whether to modify the recommended decision in Atmos's Clean Heat Plan based on staff's exceptions in its settlement testimony and require Atmos to conduct a beneficial electrification analysis and to include that analysis as part of the company's next Clean Heat Plan filing, or to accept the ALJ's recommended decision as written, as recommended by Atmos in their response to staff's exceptions. On October 14th, recommended decision 24-0740 was issued in this proceeding. It approved the settlement agreement in Atmos's Clean Heat Plan and granted Atmos's Clean Heat Plan application as modified by the settlement agreement. On November 4th, Commission trial staff filed exceptions to the recommended decision. In its exceptions, staff requested that the Commission modify the recommended decision to require Atmos to conduct a beneficial electrification analysis and to include that analysis as part of the company's next Clean Heat Plan. Staff initially made this request in its settlement testimony, and the recommended decision as written does not address staff's request. Thus, any decision made on this issue this morning would not be reversing the ALJ. Rather, this would be clarifying an issue that the ALJ did not address. Notably, staff takes no other issue with the settlement agreement and supports the ALJ's approval of the settlement agreement. On November 18th, Atmos filed a response opposing the request made by staff. Atmos raises 3 reasons why it believes the Commission should not modify the recommended decision. First, Atmos states that Rule 4731 provides the requirements for clean heat plan applications, and Atmos will comply with those rules in its next clean heat plan application. Second, Atmos states that if the Commission believes additional information should be included in the company's next clean heat plan, it can request that information through supplemental direct testimony after Atmos has filed its initial testimony in the next clean heat plan. And third, Atmos states that if staff or any other intervener is unsatisfied with the information included with Atmos's next clean heat plan application, or otherwise desires to offer additional information for the record, they can provide their own analysis and answer testimony. I can turn it to the 3 of you for discussion, or can provide a recommendation.
No, if you could provide a recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend that the Commission issue a decision consistent with the request and staff's exceptions, and require Atmos to conduct a beneficial electrification analysis and to include the results of that analysis as part of its next clean heat plan. We find staff's proposal reasonable and do not find Atmos's arguments persuasive grounds to not grant the proposal.
Are there any cost issues associated with this, or we don't know what it costs and nobody's raising those issues?
No one has raised those issues yet, and so they haven't been quantified, but I do think that there would be some cost associated with a more in-depth application package, but nothing that's been raised by staff or any other intervener.
Commissioner Plant?
Thanks. So I'd love to hear where the 2 of you are on this. I have to admit that I am skeptical that any study of beneficial electrification from Atmos is going to be worth much. I don't think it'll be relied upon by future interveners. I think it'll be probably viewed with some skepticism just because this isn't something they want to do. It's not an area in which they exercise their business. So I think it's going to be of limited value, and for that reason, I would be a little bit skeptical of requiring ratepayers to pay for something that we know in advance would probably be of limited value. I could see some value in them looking at expanding their business to incorporate other clean heat technologies, whether it's district heat or networked ground source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps individually, or even some sort of air source heat pump business or whatever it might be. Something that provides a clean heat resource for their customers that would actually build into their business plan. But having them do a study of beneficial electrification, I'm skeptical that it would be of any use to anybody. But open to arguments from the 2 of you.
Commissioner Gilman, this may be a day where we should have you go first.
Disappointed.
I agree with some of your concerns. So I've tried to craft a bit of a solution to avoid the useless study concern, or skewed study concern, or whatever it may be. At the end of the day, I would agree with staff, and I would like to see an electrification study. I mean, we can't very well cover our eyes and pretend we didn't adjudicate an entire clean heat plan that highly evaluated beneficial electrification and determined that that was the most cost-effective pathway to decarbonize for another utility. So, I understand there's significantly less motivation in a single fuel utility, but that doesn't mean that we completely ignore and don't even look at the economics of beneficial electrification, which certainly has looked favorable in other instances. So what I was trying to do was look at staff's suggestion on a BE study and try to ensure that we could have kind of reputable sources for the information and other ways for the parties to ensure that the study does look worthwhile. So my concept was to approve this study but issue guidance that the company should cite their sources for any assumptions or data inputs, and that the information used for any assumptions or data inputs should be from publicly available sources, from third-party neutral sources, so that at least the source of any information being relied upon is known and understood. Further, I would say that any model used in the analysis or any kind of calculations used in the analysis should be provided in an executable format, such that interveners, other parties, the commission itself could evaluate, other inputs and assumptions if there were kind of concerns or issues with those that were used, which could make it significantly more valuable. And then also indicate that this should be kicked off with either a stakeholder group or a working group to, in part, vet those assumptions and methodology being used to ensure that what comes out the other end would not just kind of immediately be discounted by other parties, I think which was your point, Commissioner Plant. And I would very much hope and indicate our intent that a member of the PUC staff be part of that working group. Would leave that perhaps to the executive director and the deputies to determine the appropriate staff member, but to be sure that the PUC has some representation in that working group, particularly to avoid the issues that you brought up, Commissioner Plant, to make sure this is money and an effort well spent to ensure that there is some kind of buy-in as to how it's being done from the beginning. So those are my ideas on how to avoid the biggest issues that you brought up, which I agree with if we were to grant it without any guidance at all.
I guess Commissioner Gilman, are you all right with some language in the order emphasizing potential measures that may better align with their business plan? Like Commissioner Plant said, would you have any concerns about including that in the order?
No, I think there are reasonable examples elsewhere in the US where gas utilities are retooling their business model to include, other alternative heat sources, and certainly up to them what actual options they look at for their business model and providing the end goal here of getting customers heat on cold days, heating their water, heating their food. But I think that's a perfectly fine and a liberty certainly they can take to look at other options, especially how it may fit into their business offerings in the future.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I'm willing to give it a shot.
You guys okay with an ABC order, or you want to see the order before it goes out?
I'm fine with an ABC order. I think Ms. Chula is perfectly capable of probably elaborating on some of Commissioner Plant's concerns, which I share as the reasoning why we've provided some additional guidance here to ensure that this is an effort worth everyone's while.
So I guess, Ms. Schuller, we got an ABC decision granting staff's exceptions and requiring Atmos to do a BE analysis, but with certain guardrails as outlined in this discussion, and with some emphasis as discussed by Commissioner Plant. Does that give you what you need?
I have one point of clarification for Commissioner Plant. I just want to be sure, for looking at expanding their business model, do you want to specifically limit that to things that are approved as clean heat resources per statute and rules today, or are you sort of opening that up?
No, I would say things that are approved clean heat resources, I would say would be the focus of the analysis. But if they have, technologies that they would propose could be considered resources, I don't see us excluding them from opining on that, but the emphasis is on clean heat resources as the statute defines them.
Great, thanks. That's clear. Thanks, Commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Shula. 24AL-0275E Black Hills rate case, motion for a shortened response time. Ms. Dundas.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lindsay Dundas of your Commission Council. For discussion today is a motion filed by Electrify America, party to this proceeding. In its motion, it requests to be excused from the proceeding because its testimony provided earlier in the case was on a limited issue, requesting that Black Hills continue to offer several EV charging rates with the same price ratios and seasonality. Staff was also opposed to Black Hills' proposal to eliminate these rate schedules. On rebuttal, Black Hills indicated that it agrees to keep the LGS-SEV rate. Therefore, Electrify America considers its issue uncontested. It therefore requests excusal from the proceeding and shorten response time to its motion. However, Electrify America indicates that its motion is opposed by Pueblo. It does not indicate why in its motion, and Pueblo has not yet filed a response. So I can provide a recommendation if you'd like.
I think we'd like.
Thanks, Chair. Here I recommend shortening response time to the close of business on Friday. Because we don't know why Pueblo is opposed, I recommend shortening response time instead of granting it outright this week, so that any party may raise its concerns if it desires before the merits of the motions discussed at the 11/27 CWM.
Commissioner Gilman.
Now it gets to go first. I agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision setting shortened response time.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 24A-0442E, the joint transition solicitation. Before we finish the old one, here we go, launching into the no.
That's right. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory team, and I'll be joined today by Commission Counsel Mitchell DeCinzo. This morning, the Commission will be discussing several procedural issues in this case, such as motions for permissive intervention, a pending omnibus motion, and topics and procedures for supplemental direct. I'm going to provide a brief introduction of the case and then turn it over to Mr. DeCinzo, who will start us off with the interventions. On October 15th, 2024, Public Service filed the Just Transition Solicitation, or JTS, application, as supported by the direct testimony and attachments of 9 witnesses. The concept of the JTS first appeared in the updated non-unanimous partial settlement agreement that Public Service filed in the 2021 Electric Resource Plan and Clean Energy Plan, or ERP and CEP. The JTS concept dovetails with the retirement date of the Pueblo Unit 3 coal facility, although the JTS is not geographically limited to the Pueblo area, nor is the resource need limited to replacing Unit 3. To the extent not already addressed in the settlement agreement, this JTS is to be treated as an interim ERP under Commission's rules. I plan on getting more into the details of the JTS later, but at this point I'll just say that one of the primary objectives of the JTS is to acquire utility generation and storage resources for a 3-year period of time beginning in 2029 through 2031, although the company may acquire resources with earlier online dates if those are available. Public Service forecasts a substantial need for new resources during this period, which is driven at least in part by the early retirement of the company's coal facilities. This proceeding will likely have significant impacts on emissions reductions, ensuring a just transition to those communities most impacted by the company's retirement of its coal fleet, and long-term rates. Given the magnitude of this proceeding, advisors assume that the Commission will retain the matter to hear en banc. Unless any of you have questions or any initial comments, I'll turn it over to Mr. DeCinzo, who will start off with the motions for permissive intervention.
You want to vote on keeping it en banc?
A vote isn't necessary, but you can certainly take that action if you would like.
Commissioner Plant, you okay hearing it en banc?
Yes.
Commissioner, oh, sorry. I meant to go to you first, Commissioner Gilman.
You can go to Commissioner Plant. I like that. We're good. Yes, I agree.
As do I. Thanks, Mr. Eden. Mr. DeCinzo.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Commissioners, Mitchell DeCinzo of your Commission Council. I'll be addressing the interventions filed in this proceeding, a pro hoc vice request, and then I will offer a procedural recommendation regarding Public Services omnibus motion. First, the interventions as of right. Timely and appropriate notices of intervention of right were filed by the Colorado Energy Office, the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, and Commission trial staff. Under Commission Rule 1401B, no decision is necessary for timely and appropriately filed notices of intervention of right. While no explicit determination is needed, your written decision from today can acknowledge the notices of intervention of right filed by CEO, UCA, and staff. I'll therefore move on to the permissive interventions. Generally, for requests for permissive intervention under Commission Rule 1401C, movements are required to demonstrate a pecuniary or tangible interest that may be substantially affected by the proceeding, and that the interest would not otherwise be adequately represented. In total, there are 21 non-residential council-represented interveners. For convenience, I have grouped them into 5 categories and will quickly list the intervening parties. There are 4 interveners representing large and wholesale customer interests: Holy Cross Electric Association, Colorado Energy Consumers, Climax Molybdenum Company, and Walmart. There are 6 interveners representing environmental interest groups, many of whom file jointly: the Natural Resources Defense Council and Sierra Club, filing jointly; Western Resource Advocates and Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, filing jointly; Healthy Air and Water Colorado; the Environmental Justice Coalition, filing jointly and comprised of Green Latinos, Grid Alternatives, NAACP State Conference Pueblo Branch, Roots to Resilience, and Vote Solar; Pivot Energy, and the Colorado Renewable Energy Society and Physicians for Social Responsibility, filing jointly. There are also 4 local and municipal community groups: Pueblo County, the City of Pueblo, and the Pueblo Economic Development Corporation, filing jointly; Moffett County and the City of Craig, jointly; Town of Hayden and Rote County, also jointly; Colorado Communities for Climate Action. There are also 6 developers and other interests: the Interwest Energy Alliance, Colorado Independent Energy Association, Onward Energy Management LLC, the Coalition for Community Solar Access, Eastern Metro Area Business Coalition, and Colorado Solar and Energy Storage, Solar Energy Industries Association, and Advanced Energy United, filing jointly. And lastly, there's an additional state office that seeks intervention, and that is the Office of Just Transition. Council has reviewed these filings and believes that each meets the technical requirements of Commission Rule 1401B, particularly where none of these 21 interventions are opposed and all are represented by appropriate counsel. We recommend the Commission could grant these 21 permissive interventions, but would advise that, given the number of interveners in this party, the Commission encourage the parties in its order to work together and coordinate where their interests align to facilitate an efficient proceeding. If there are any interventions you would like me to discuss in more depth, I'd be happy to do so, but I'll pause here for your vote or discussion on whether to grant the 21 unopposed interventions in this proceeding.
Commissioner Gilman.
Going first. Yeah, I agree with the recommendation to grant them.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
As do I.
Next, I will discuss the Brohawk Vice motion. An attorney who is not licensed to practice law in Colorado must be granted permission to appear Brohawk Vice in a commission proceeding. Under Commission Rule 1201A and Rules 205.3 and 205.4 of the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure, to appear Brohawk Vice before a state agency, an out-of-state attorney must file a motion with the relevant agency, file the motion with the Colorado Office of Attorney Registration, pay a fee, designate an associate attorney who is licensed in Colorado, and obtain permission from the agency. Patrick Wolseley of the Sierra Club of Oakland, California, moves for Brohawk Vice admission to practice before the commission. Mr. Wolseley states he has filed a copy of this motion with the clerk of the Colorado Supreme Court and has paid the required fee. Council finds that Mr. Wolseley's filing meets the required rule, and we recommend granting this request subject to confirmation that the requisite fees have been paid.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
Agree.
As do I.
In addition to the above unopposed permissive interventions we have discussed so far, there is one intervention from an individual ratepayer on a pro se basis. This intervention is opposed by public service. In addition to requiring a pecuniary and tangible interest not otherwise represented, Commission Rule 1401C requires that a move-in who is a residential customer, agricultural customer, or small business customer discuss in the motion whether the distinct interest of the consumer is either not adequately represented by UCA or inconsistent with other classes of consumers represented by UCA. The motion to intervene, filed by Leslie Glustrom on November 14th, cites Colorado Revised Statutes sections 46.1091, 46.51042, and contends that she is entitled to be heard, noting that she has been granted pro se intervener status in numerous prior proceedings. In addition to asserting pecuniary and tangible interests in the outcome of this proceeding, Ms. Glustrom states that she will address two specific issues that other parties have neglected: the discount rate used to determine the present value of the revenue requirement, and the cost of outages that result from relying on centralized generation, long transmission lines, and complex distribution networks. On November 18th, Public Service filed a response in opposition to Ms. Glustrom's motion. In its response, Public Service contends the motion fails to demonstrate how her interest as a customer cannot be adequately represented by UCA, or how her interest as an Xcel Energy shareholder cannot be represented by Public Service. Additionally, Public Service stated her environmental concerns will be adequately addressed by the numerous environmental advocacy organizations that have intervened. Lastly, Public Service contends Ms. Glustrom's assertion regarding discount rates is incorrect, that the company's calculations are fully compliant with statute, and they cite where these issues are addressed in their testimony. Public Service requests that the Commission deny her intervention consistent with the last two ERP proceedings. I can pause here for your discussion or proceed to offering a recommendation.
Yeah, why don't you offer a recommendation and then we'll take it from there.
Consistent with past ERP decisions from this commission, Ms. Glustrom's intervention does not technically meet the standards required for a residential intervener. Namely, the motion fails to make a compelling case that her distinct interests as a residential customer and ratepayer will not be adequately represented by UCA or other interveners in this proceeding. Specifically, parties that are represented by counsel in this proceeding also plan to address the environmental, economic, and public interest concerns raised by Ms. Glustrom, including the numerous environmental groups, those representing community interests, commission staff, and the Office of the Just Transition. Rather than adding her as a pro se residential ratepayer party, we recommend that her numerous filings thus far be construed as public comments. Consistent with her comments and filings in the most recent ERP and the 2016 ERP, the Commission can fully consider those comments, and parties may respond to the points raised by all public comments through appropriate testimony. I'll pause here for your voter discussion on whether to deny the pro se intervention here and confirm that the filings made to date are construed as public comments such that they can be addressed through party responses.
Commissioner Gilman, you've been dealing with this issue of pro se interveners for 5 years. Curious to hear where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, this is difficult. I mean, I think in the proceedings we've done, Ms. Glustrom provides very robust public comment that certainly in the past we have found to be very useful to the commission. At the same time, with pro se intervener that overlaps in areas of interest with several existing interveners could be more difficult and kind of belabor the process here. So perhaps an avenue is to construe them as public comment, as Mr. DeCenzo indicated, but really encourage Ms. Glustrom to work with the other parties that are representing some of the issues that she has interest in, but interested to hear your all thoughts on the matter.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Gilman. I think her interests generally align with a number of the different interveners that we already have. I think you said 21 different interveners at this point, right? And but I mean, there's also a long history of Ms. Glustrom providing comments and input on issues that come before the commission, and she certainly brings a great history and perspective to the proceedings. And so I think her analysis is valuable, and but I also think it can be integrated into the conversations through the public comment process without adding another pro se intervener. And I would urge the intervening parties to look at the various different evidence that Ms. Klustrom brings up in her public comments, if that's the way that we go, and analyze them and determine whether or not they would like to introduce them as evidence as well. But I think that the approach that's been proposed by the advisors is the one that's most consistent with the current rules and law.
I guess I struggle with it a little more. I think Ms. Klustrom has often raised a unique perspective, and one that I've personally found to be useful, and not always captured by the other parties. So I'm less persuaded by that argument, but concerned about having pro se parties in a sprawling case like this. So maybe I'll utilize Commissioner Gilman's approach of this non-strenuous dissent, and just put a footnote in there that maybe I could write Mr. DeCenzo and leave it at that. You want to keep going?
Yes. Lastly, I will address Public Services Omnibus Motion and MEP. Alongside its application, Public Service filed an omnibus motion containing a request for extraordinary protection of various information, as well as a request for a waiver of several commission rules. The requests are similar to those the company has filed in prior ERP proceedings. Since the commission has now established parties to this proceeding, I will not delve into the substance of this motion today, but rather recommend the commission set a response deadline to Public Services motion, including both requests for rule waivers and an initial motion for extraordinary protection, to December 4th, 2024.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you, commissioners, and I believe Mr. Eden will take it from here again.
Mr. Eden.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now to more of the substance of the JTS application. For context for your discussion regarding the completeness of the application, as well as potential topics for supplemental direct testimony. Although the JTS is focused on the resource needs from 2029 through 2031, the company anticipates an extremely large resource need. Specifically, based on its phase 1 modeling thus far, the company anticipates the need to acquire almost 14,000 megawatts of resources. For context, approximately 5,800 megawatts of resources was contained in the approved portfolio for the 2021 ERP and CEP. Several factors contribute to the large resource need projection, including the retirement of coal facilities, revised electric load carrying capability or ELCC calculations, a revised planning reserve margin, and high growth projections related to EVs, beneficial electrification, and new large loads like data centers. Another factor contributing to the resource need are the efforts to continue reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Public Service argues that acquiring the resources in 2029 and 2030 that will achieve an 80% emissions reduction by 2030 remains a key focus of the JTS. In addition to the large acquisition of resources, the company proposes improvements to the Commission's standard ERP process. One such proposal focuses on transmission. As you'll recall from the 2021 ERP and CEP, the Commission expressed serious concerns regarding the large, unexpected cost increases in transmission investments Public Service asserted where necessary to bring new resources online. In this proceeding, Public Service proposes a transmission adder and credit system that is designed to simulate the locational benefit of resources and ultimately to encourage the selection of resources that necessitate fewer transmission investments. Regarding the potential rate increases associated with the acquisition of numerous new utility resources, Public Service provides a long-term rate analysis model. While Public Service's analysis estimates a relatively modest compound annual growth rate, its rate projections rely on significant increases in retail sales. In anticipation of questions regarding its long-term rate analysis model, Public Service offers to host a technical conference for commissioners and interested parties to have an opportunity to discuss the details of the model's inputs and assumptions. Turning to the issue of completeness, per Commission Rule 1303, if an application fails to identify all applicable requirements of Commission rules and decisions and address each of those requirements, the Commission may deem the application incomplete. Typically, the evaluation of completeness is relatively straightforward, but in this case, the Commission has issued numerous directives for the JTS application throughout the course of the 2021 ERP and CEP. In addition, in its notice of intervention as of right, CEO requests the Commission wait to deem the application complete until either 1, the Commission determines that supplemental direct testimony is not necessary, or 2, the company files any supplemental direct testimony. Relatedly, as Mr. DeCinzo referenced earlier, we received a public comment arguing that the company's application almost certainly fails to comply with Section 40-2-139 on the proper discount rate to determine the net present value of future carbon-based fuel costs. In a subsequent filing, however, the company points out the exact location in its testimony where the company explains its compliance with Section 40-2-139. I'll note that the JTS application automatically deems complete on November 30th. Advisors have reviewed the directives from the 2021 ERP and CEP, and although the company's direct case may fail to address a few of the Commission's directives, in our opinion, these failures do not warrant deeming the application incomplete. Rather, advisors believe that the identified omissions can be resolved through supplemental direct testimony. For these reasons, advisors would not recommend adopting CEO's approach. I'm happy to answer any questions you have if you would like to get further into the details, but at this time, I'll turn it over to you for your discussion of how to move forward with completeness and any supplemental direct the Commission may be interested in pursuing. Advisors do not think it is necessary to reach a formal vote today on the exact parameters of supplemental direct. And then after you've discussed what topics of supplemental direct may be appropriate, I have several procedural recommendations on how best to move forward.
So I do have a few items for supplemental direct, but I will continue my pattern of Commissioner Gilman. Do you have issues you'd like to raise, or you want me to go?
Just maybe a question for Mr. Eden, more on like the completeness front and following up from the previous ERP, which was the CEP. I know too many things here. You had indicated that not all of the directives from the Commission in the prior ERP were followed or included in the direct case. Do you have like a list of those that were not included? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yes, we've compiled a list of those directives from the phase 1 and the phase 2 decisions. It's a fairly lengthy list, but I'm happy to kind of go through and provide some examples if you would like.
If you can hit the big tickets, that would be helpful.
Sure. Let me see if I can give a few examples.
Sorry.
Mr. Eden, you want me and Commissioner Plant to go through our supplemental direct while you prepare and prioritize? Would that be useful?
Yeah, that might be helpful.
I mean, I have some other like areas just of interest, not completely discrete supplemental direct questions right now, But as to this completeness question, I'm just wondering to what degree and how fully has the company actually fulfilled what the commission told them to do, I think is a very relevant question. But
Right.
you can go on. That wasn't to say the chair and commissioner plan can't go on. I just like a bit of a discrete issue to me.
Yeah, and well, I guess we don't have to decide completeness today. We can come back and look at this next week if we want, right? Because it doesn't auto deem complete till the 30th. So you want to delay the decision, Commissioner Gilman, let Mr. Eden circulate his list to the three of us, and then we can take it up next week instead of trying to figure it out today. So we won't deem it complete today. We won't allow it to auto deem. We'll just bring it back on the 27th once we've all had a chance to digest the list. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, I think it just gets to a broader concern of mine. I think the commission considers very carefully directives that we give for kind of subsequent filings. And to the extent the company doesn't do that, I think we have to think very carefully about what our recourse is, right? Like this regulated system only works if the company actually submits to the regulation. If they don't do what they're told to do, it puts us in a very difficult spot with the company's requests to understand if they're actually even complying with the commission's orders.
Well, I certainly share that concern, and I have not seen Mr. Eaton's list, nor do I have an independent view of whether the failure to comply with the prior decisions is material or not. So I don't know. You want to jump in, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think an analysis of where they've complied and where they haven't complied is pretty essential for us in terms of determining whether or not their application is complete. I think complete means complete. I don't know. I'll be radical. But so I would agree with that. And then I had some areas that I would like to have some more discussion from the company on specifically in their one of their portfolios. They consider 900 megawatts of VPP dispatchable demand. But they indicate that there would be no gas offset from any of that VPP demand, and I'd like to understand their analysis there a little bit better. And then also, I'd like to have a discussion from the company on opportunities for maximizing distribution capacity procurement as a portion of the overall JTS, and where we can make investments in capacity in the distribution system that would offset requirements for investments more directed to the bulk system.
On the second, I'll have maybe a detailed suggestion about how to do that. On the former, I strongly support getting that question answered about why a VPP on the distribution system wouldn't help avoid at least some natural gas. Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I'm good with both of those areas of exploration. I have some broader, less fleshed out areas that I'd be happy to introduce just as food for thought. And so we can, I don't know what the date is, Mr. Eden, where we'll try and firm up the supplemental direct, but try and form these into an idea and see where we get. I have significant concerns coming out of the last ERP about the fairness of the bidding process and information that is disclosed to other bidders to ensure that if there are specific system needs all bidders are aware of that, not just the company. So with regard to kind of locational specificity related to certain asset types and capacities needed for reliability or for other purposes on the system, we saw this play out in the last ERP, and it would appear to me that the company was the only bidder that was aware that they needed new thermal generation in the San Luis Valley as an example. So I'd like to explore in supplemental direct a question or requirement of some disclosure of any of those needs that the company is aware of or plans on identifying throughout the process, and how those become available to the broader list of bidders so that we get the best prices, best competition for ratepayers based upon information that is apparently known to the company. So that's one area. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, let's go area by area. So I strongly support that, and I'd particularly emphasize the example you gave us about locational differences. If there's going to be locational value, it's got to be disclosed prior to the bids in the phase 1 process. It can't be somehow showing up in phase 2. Commissioner Plant, any comments, concerns with that request?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. I have some more looking to do with the forecasting to understand kind of the base level of beneficial electrification that's included there, but I think I'll have a lot of interest in comparing, contrasting that to what we're hearing across proceedings to ensure that we're hearing the same story about what beneficial electrification we expect. Kind of a tangent of that is really understanding better the portion of EV growth that is expected to hit on the system peak and why those assumptions are appropriate. So like I said, I have a little more homework to do on that, but an area that piqued my interest and maybe an area we need to probe more, as we continue on the next couple of weeks to identify what additional information we need. But this has been an area I've been pretty focused on, ensuring we're receiving consistent data and assumptions across proceedings. So to the extent that BE assumptions are different here than perhaps in gas proceedings or things like that, I think that would be important and instructive to follow up on. So I'll stop there on that one. See if you have anything.
I strongly support it, Commissioner Plant.
I do as well.
I think we might want to figure out sooner than later or identify if we need any sort of involvement from a greenhouse gas neutral verifier like we had in the previous CEP. Just something to look at, since this RAP will include 2030, which was the deadline for compliance with the CEP statute. I'm probably using the wrong term there, but you get it. We have a 2030 greenhouse gas target. So I think we'll have to investigate. I don't know if it looks like a question to the company or what that looks like. Does CDPHE need to have a role here or whatever, since we are involving the actual deadline for that compliance with statute, to understand if we would still be on track, kind of throughout this process for compliance with that statute. So we'll leave that one there for now.
And I'd just say that maybe, again, I support it, but it'd probably be more appropriate for the order maybe than the supplemental direct request, and more an invite to the parties. Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar concern. I think since Clean Air, Clean Jobs, it's been CDPHE's role to verify emissions reductions, and I'm not sure why we've differed from that here.
And I think the CDPHE is coming in December 4th at our weekly meeting. So maybe if you can help us keep track of this, Mr. Eden, and make sure we raise it, then that may be one opportunity. Commissioner Gilman?
One area that I was interested in the previous ERP, but I think is coming into somewhat greater focus now, is to understand, to the extent that we explore new gas CTs or gas assets in the JTS, to understand kind of the impact of the company's projected reduction in retail sales on the gas system, and how that may or may not influence the cost to provide firm gas service to gas CTs, especially kind of locationally on the gas system. I think it stands to reason to me these two things interact, and that the cost allocation of what these larger transport customers, which would include a gas ET, would bear if we actually see the sort of substantial reductions that the company is anticipating from retail sales on their gas system. So that's about a 40% reduction in the next 15 years in retail sales. And so want to be sure that we have a way to understand or quantify through the modeling of different portfolios, kind of different bounds of potentially different costs that gas service could take if we see other substantial shifts in usage and cost allocation on the gas system at large. So I know that's kind of a nebulous big one, but I'm a little concerned we could be using current costs, and if we see some major shifts or cost allocation or difference in usage going forward, I want to be sure we actually have valid projections for what it will cost to serve gas to these gas ETs in the future.
I'm good with that request, Commissioner Plant.
I am as well.
And I can try and work with Ms. Treen to make these like actual questions in the meantime. I would say the last, area of interest, which is obviously a big one given where we're at now in the 2021 CEP ERP, is really identifying ahead of time how we avoid the really significant delays that we saw in that proceeding, which not only kind of prolonged it, but have the, I think, still possibility of jeopardizing resource adequacy, being that we have 0 signed contracts and appear to, at least potentially have caused cost increases across all of those resources, given the time from the bids to actual acquisition. So I think we're going to be needing to think proactively on this one, how we avoid, if they were overwhelmed by the number of bids in a 5,800 megawatt acquisition, just imagine 14,000. So we need a better system. We need assurances ahead of time that the company can execute this on the intended time frame. So I don't know what form that question takes, but just wanted to raise that concern at the onset that we need to be thinking through this, because we've got to learn from what's going on right now.
Amen. Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that, quite honestly, I think this is going to need to be something that, all the parties that want to engage in this conversation would be welcome to address, because I think we really need to look overall at the process and fix what's going wrong.
The only other thing I'd add, with regard to transmission, clearly in the prior ERP CEP, there was a big issue with transmission in phase 2, the $2 billion surprise, I think it was called. Whereas suddenly in phase 2, the company identified a $2 billion transmission need in the Denver metro area, in addition to the approved Colorado Power Pathways transmission project. And so the commission's reaction to that was to try to better integrate kind of transmission, not necessarily like minute planning, but the broad idea of the economics and how it interacts with different portfolios. And so in that, we had provided a directive for staff to begin working on this independent transmission, I botched the term, but essentially a transmission consultant to help to understand how to kind of tailor or target some portfolios to minimize those expenses, and if not minimize, try to quantify them so that we're not going totally blind to the transmission costs. I didn't see anything in staff's intervention related to this, so I think we're right now without any information as to how this effort is going. So probably an invitation right now, if they're able, for staff to inform the commission how this is going, provide some sort of update. Certainly I'd prefer that as early as possible. And then perhaps we have supplemental direct related to that, but that was a massive area of concern coming out of the ERP. And I would just say we're not aware how that's going into this process. And I would very much like to be aware. So if staff could update us or inform us or make some sort of filing, that would be very appreciated.
I support that request, Commissioner Plant.
I do as well.
Anything else, Commissioner Gilman?
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. So I got, I think 4 things, maybe a little more in the weeds. The first is a request for an alternative load growth scenario. And I'd frame it this way: from 2010 through 2023, actual growth in retail sales in Colorado has been under 0.3%. As I understand it, the company is now projecting in its base case forecast for retail sales to increase at roughly 8% from 2024 to 2032, more than 25 times greater than historical levels in its base case forecast. Even the low forecast projects sales growth of roughly 3% through both 2032 and 2052, still 10 times greater than historical levels. To put this in context, in the 2021 ERP base case, growth in sales was 1% through 2032. As you mentioned, Commissioner Gilman, forecasting peak demand, they're showing 4.5% growth through 2032 in the base case and 1.4% in the low. In the prior ERP, the base case was under 0.8%, such that our new revised base case is more than 5 times greater. Given these changes, I'd like to talk with you both about ordering the company to run call it a lower low scenario that matches the compound annual growth rate in the prior 2021 ERP base case. And if the company needs more clarity, I just say it was 2024 to 2032 growth in retail sales of 1.1%, and through 2050 growth of 1.3%. Along with this lower low forecast, I would ask the company to specify the exact differences by sector in both sales and peak demand forecasts between the assumptions in the lower low forecast, basically the 2021 base case, and the updated JTS base case forecast for large new loads, EV demand, and building electrification. I think this is partly what you are getting at, Commissioner Gilman, trying to understand how each segment is driving the peak demand forecast. And, finally, I'd like to request that the company develop a full dispatch and capacity expansion alternative resource scenario for this lower low sales and peak demand growth scenario. Just given the enormous changes in demand forecasts, this seems like a reasonable request to help ground the analysis and make sure meaningful options are available. So, Commissioner Gilman, what do you think?
I'd like to see that in writing so I can better process it after this. But yeah, I mean, to me, certainly the sales forecasts are a very interesting question, but I am probably most acutely interested in the relationship of system peak to the sales forecast. Looking at the opportunity for VPPs and much more in-depth, better demand response offerings. I think when I looked at some of the information that Ms. Rosen had prepared in that unrelated effort in response to the governor's letter, it was identified that the capacity factor of the system has actually been getting worse. And looking at the emergence and increased uptake of all of this beneficial electrification that are internet connected, highly controllable loads from EVs and heat pumps and internet connected heat pump water heaters, it certainly stands to reason to me that we have far more control than we've ever had before on how you control these loads, how they interact with the system peak. And so if we are building to a future with a worse capacity factor, I'm very concerned. So I think I'll look at your language and I may have some additions to further emphasize the relationship of the system peak to those growth forecasts and why are those appropriate assumptions as far as the percent of those loads that are hitting on system peak and are not able to be moved to better optimize the cost across the system.
Commissioner Plan, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I had many of the same questions. I think when you look just generally at a 4% annual growth in demand, but a 5% annual growth in peak, that points to not controlling that demand. And it seems as though most of the demand that we're talking about is somewhat controllable, particularly in the area of EV. And I think in the EV demand scenarios, there was an even greater impact on peak. And that suggests to me that maybe they're assuming there's no management of charging within that population. And so, yeah, seeing that more specifically investigated from the company, I think would be very valuable.
Thanks. And that's a nice transition into my second request, which may not be supplemental direct. It may be more in the order. But we're going to see 3 separate filings, including this one, each sort of largely siloed. This JTS one for new generation, the Denver transmission CPCN for new transmission, and the DSP for new distribution. I'm really concerned that this silo approach will continue to lead to what I'd call suboptimal outcomes and not allow for better solutions across all segments. And for example, in the prior 2021 ERP phase 2 process, we approved roughly 1,800 megawatts of new battery energy storage projects, really to help avoid new CTs. Of this 1,800 megawatts in winning bids, 1,400 megawatts was located outside the Denver transmission constrained region. I guess because it's cheaper to build outside the metro area. Since the 2021 process concluded, however, the company is now claiming in this filing that it needs almost $40 billion of new transmission and another $42 billion of new distribution over the next 20 years. Given this need for new transmission and distribution, it seems like the battery energy storage located outside the Denver metro area would exacerbate the need for this new transmission, while battery energy storage located within the transmission constrained metro area would help avoid the need for new transmission spending. And if we could put the storage in a distribution constrained area, we could maybe create even more value, comprehensively avoiding generation, transmission, and distribution investments. And I'm just really frustrated to see us build $1 billion worth of battery energy storage in ways that may exacerbate our need for new transmission. In Mr. Eiley's direct testimony, he says that the company is proposing to include an adder for resources located in the Denver transmission constrained region, but I'm concerned about how to set this adder without any real interaction with the transmission modeling in the CPCN case. Since we're likely to be buying at least some more batteries anyway, I'd like to avoid as much transmission and distribution spending as possible with these investments. Given that the Denver transmission CPCN and the DSP are due to be filed in mid-December, I'd find it helpful to jointly consider these issues at similar times. For example, again, to better understand how utility scale and distributed batteries can comprehensively avoid generation, transmission, and distribution. Although I don't have a specific proposal to put in front of you today about how to best do this, I'd suggest that we ask the parties to respond to these siloing concerns by December 4th and ask advisors and counsel to help us find the best way to ensure adequate and integrated records in each of these 3 processes. So, Commissioner Goman.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, that's been a shortcoming, and I think was very much highlighted in the last ERP, just the failure to be able to include any transmission. I appreciate that, Mr. Riley put forth a proposal we can maybe pivot off of and work on. I question if it really is binary, or is there some like actual scale of benefits to where something is located in terms of proximity. But yeah, I think we'll really have to stretch our processes to understand how to best integrate the information we're getting between, as you noted, all three layers of the system and costs that end up impacting ratepayers and have a very direct relationship to each other. So at a minimum, I would say it's quite possible once those proceedings come in, the commission may wish to issue additional questions to the company in this proceeding, at a minimum. I mean, it's difficult to know a ton the second those come in. We're going to be finishing other cases, the press of business is pretty difficult, but I think we could probably use, advisors' help and things to get into those filings as quickly as possible to identify areas that need to be raised in the JTS as soon as possible. So it could be that we issue supplemental direct, in December or whenever Mr. Eaton's thinking here, and then have a second round, because we simply have to introduce the ideas from those other proceedings. But yeah, like more broadly than that, and as those mature, I'd be very interested to hear from counsel and advisors how we most appropriately transfer information from one to the other, because it's just we're kind of breaking this system. We can't be looking at these in silos. It will lead to significantly increased costs for ratepayers if we can't consider kind of the intelligence and information from one to the other to make the best integrated decisions. So that I certainly agree with.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. That's one of the things I was trying to get at with the DCP, the distribution capacity procurement approach, is really where can we avoid some of these, bulk grid system investments where we don't need to, and really to try and, your point about, these disparate proceedings that really feed off of each other. I think it doesn't benefit the system in any way, and I think it really imperils some of the investments that, long-term investments that we're asking ratepayers to make if we're not, first optimizing our distribution system and then filling in the need on the bulk system, and instead of doing it the direction we go now, which is, start with a gross, view of the load and then build out the bulk system, entirely to meet that load, whereas we could meet some of that more locally and at much lower cost, and without, as you pointed out, the transmission upgrades that increasing the bulk system would require. So I think, yeah, I think you've hit, one of the real challenges on the head, and how we integrate these various different proceedings, particularly our distribution planning and our bulk system planning. They really need to happen together, as far as I can tell, and I'm not sure exactly how we do that, or how we systemically change what we have now to be able to be more effective that way.
Appreciate it. The third request that involves rate impact modeling, and I just start off saying that I appreciate the company following a rate impact model sponsored by the lead policy witness in a way that reasonably reflects the company's actual planned capital spending, which hasn't always been the case. I have three requests on this. First, I'd ask for an additional rate impact modeling run for the lower low scenario, however it comes out in the final order, in the same format as the other two rate impact scenarios already presented by the company. Second, I'd like the company to break out the cost per kilowatt hour number into two separate categories, one for large new customers like QTS, and a second one for all other non-new large customers across all three of the demand forecast scenarios. I guess three demand forecast scenarios. I'd also like to ask the company to run these three scenarios, assuming that the revenues from the new large customer loads are based on the QTS deal structure, including the full actual rate discount, the TCA exemptions, and the wildfire mitigation rider exclusions that were in the final tariff. If the company believes it can do better than the QTS deal going forward, they can present whenever they want, but I'd ask to see the 20-year rate impacts using the QTS assumptions. Third, I asked the company to provide metrics in terms of the new retail revenues, not just kilowatt hour sales required for each of the three categories: large loads, EVs, and beneficial electrification, that they present in figure 2.2-5 on page 44 of the technical appendix. The idea would be to establish benchmarks that would allow us to collectively understand and manage capital spending over time, depending on the company's ability to generate marginal revenue above costs in each demand growth category. The goal would be to ensure we hit the cost per kilowatt hour targets on line 64 of the rate impact model under all scenarios, and avoid continuing to grow capital spending while failing to meet the revenue growth targets. So Commissioner Gilman, thoughts on more detailed requests on the rate impact modeling?
I'm looking. All right, so they break the cost per kilowatt, you had said, into large new customers and all other large.
Yeah, I'm just
non-new
worried that we can grow load. Say all the load is exactly like the QTS deal with discounted rates. If you just look at average sales, it may look fine, but I'm worried that those discounted rates produce very little benefits that in terms of.
So what you would like is, in the rate forecast, any large new load that is added gets the same deal.
Right.
In that modeling. We may have to determine what we consider large in that directive. I think I'd like to see the language that I might have another suggestion. I'm catching on as quick as I can. So I just think we might need to define that a little better to ensure that the directive can definitively be followed. I think the actual to hit on one of my other obsessions, I would like as much of this information and the rate analysis to be publicly available as possible, and only confidential when absolutely necessary. I think the QTS rate discount was confidential, so I'm trying to figure out how to dance around that and get publicly available projections that very much get to your point, without disclosure of something that was previously determined to be confidential. So we can work on it this week, maybe with advisors and council. But I guess as a general thing, point, especially with regard to the rate impact modeling, which is very much something that is of interest to normal ratepayers, they should be able to access that information in these records. So just as part of this discussion and the directive, we should endeavor to make all of this publicly available whenever possible. So we just might have to do something around the assumptions so they're not disclosing confidential information. But that's my only additional point there.
Thank you. And I support I support that, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I support that as well. Yeah, and I wonder if we could do just a non-QTS assumption that's, sort of the public version, and then back out the QTS as a add-on to that, as opposed to having QTS built into the initial model. But yeah, we can kind of iterate on this as we see language.
And my fourth request is for the company to expand the JTS all source RFP document and add a model power purchase agreement and term sheet to Appendix D10 to solicit dispatchable, distribution, interconnected battery storage bids. I'd request that these bids be structured as an in front of the meter resource that can interconnect to the distribution system, including at the high voltage side of distribution substations, either through new greenfield development or by adding battery storage to existing CSG or rooftop solar projects. Given the $80 billion that the company is proposing to spend on new T&D over the next 20 years, I'd like to see what new battery storage interconnected to the distribution system in front of the meter can do to avoid this new T&D investment, particularly when the full generation, transmission, and distribution benefits are included in the cost-effective analysis. I would also ask the company to include a liquidated damage provision in the model contract to ensure that these battery storage resources show up when we need them. And I'd structure it as close as possible to the type of approaches that we're using with the transmission interconnected battery storage payment arrangements. In return, and I also think the company needs to include provisions that give it similar dispatch control and flexibility as with the transmission connected batteries. I know these two provisions may result in higher bids, but I think that's fine as we move away towards voluntary approaches where there are no consequences if resources don't show up. Finally, and just to be clear, I'd allow the company to bid in utility-owned battery storage as part of this. I'll try and initiate a broader conversation about demand response and VPPs as my last item, but wanted to raise those issues separately since the RFP model contract and transmission and distribution benefit evaluation of distribution interconnected dispatchable batteries can largely be based on what we're doing with the transmission interconnected batteries. So we just have a very clear model that's clean how to do this. So I'll stop there and see what you guys think. Commissioner Gilman.
Not really a question, but like a general musing. I wonder the influence, like as we look at the wildfire mitigation plan, which is currently under evaluation by the commission, the possibility for more frequency of PSPS events and things, and like how that just integrates to having more distributed energy storage in terms of that as a strategy that also integrates with the PSPS and broader wildfire mitigation plan, especially in like high-risk areas. And I'm just trying to our previous discussion, these problems just keep getting bigger and involving more and more proceedings, right? But like looking at the possibility of increasingly frequent disruption events to customers, especially in specific geographic areas, there clearly is a relationship to distribution system sited storage in that discussion. So I don't know how we bring those together. I don't know if it's like a firm suggestion here, but I think we'll just have to explore like how these many things, I mean, I kind of commonly wonder if we move to the sort of frequency of PSPS events that say California has, if we will suddenly see a whole lot more behind the meter storage as well, especially in certain areas that could serve as a dispatchable resource if we're smart and know about it and integrate it into the system and have it for these, well, I guess they're blue sky high use days, as we would call them. So I don't know. I just to point out, like there's this other tangent here where I think this very much could relate in some ways to some of the wildfire mitigation as well. That maybe we investigate here or there or something.
Yeah. So we're not going to vote today. I think we'll just see if advisors can put all three of our ideas and thoughts into sort of a draft order that we can look at. Maybe December 4th, we can get the thoughts of the parties in light of this discussion. And then, I don't know, the 11th or the 18th, we'll take a formal vote on a final order. Commissioner Plan, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree, wholeheartedly with that. And, I might ask, I mean, I know you're focused in this specific request on storage, but I think there's also an opportunity for exploring, generation that might be located on, leased rooftops and things of that nature, or expanding existing systems that could be included as well.
So I guess the last thing is, I mean, maybe there's a request to develop in an RFP and a model contract for demand response and VPPs beyond battery storage. The company did include some language about a DR RFP in its filing. At the same time, I don't know exactly how to model different DR VPP load shapes, how to avoid cannibalizing the company's existing DR and load control programs, or even how to develop a model contract given the multiple different potential technologies at play. So I just throw that out there as an explanation of why I tried to limit that request to battery storage, with a simple capacity payment, a clear model contract. So I don't know if you have any further comments on that, but that's all I have. Commissioner Goman.
Okay, sorry. So are you kind of asking if we should look at if VPPs and DR should have a model contract too, or did I miss that? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just like, yeah, maybe. I'm just saying, I don't know. I like the battery storage contract RFP language. I can see really clearly. I can see how they evaluate it. And it's largely based on what we do on the transmission side, just transferring it to the distribution side. I don't quite know how to do that with demand response and VPPs, but I'd like to raise that issue and see if we can get something similar with demand response and VPPs.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear from Commissioner Plan on this, but I'll still give my comments because you came to me first anyway. Yeah, I think we struggle with implementing these after the fact because as we discussed even in the prior ERP, you really kind of cannibalize and steal the value of some of these if you just build out all of the generation assuming they don't show up, right? Then it's like, oh, well, that demand response isn't worth much. We already built all the generation, so you don't save the money on the generation. And we might already build all the transmission, so you don't save the money on the transmission. So I think like the writing's on the wall for me, it has to be somehow integrated into kind of the resource plan, because otherwise you really cannibalize the value that you could get if it's implemented later. I am not certain or confident maybe how much intent the company has themselves to very kind of seriously pursue VPP and more robust demand response. So I have been trying to figure out what the free market solution is here. And so I like the idea of bidding it. At the same time, it's a newer market in some ways. So if we come up with really intense kind of penalties, that could spook a lot of participation. So I think we'll have to figure out how to strike the right balance, but I very much like the idea of trying to figure out how to bring some kind of free market proposals here that would allow different aggregators and people to actually bring these resources who are very interested in seeing them succeed and be as robust as possible into this market. So what do you think, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you and what you're bringing up. I think in terms of, I'm kind of thinking of it a little bit as some different things, although I think that they do somewhat overlap because they're, distributed, capacity that's on the distribution system. The VPP, contract, I think of as, taking advantage of customer-sided resources that can be aggregated and managed through a VPP. And I'm hoping that that's a real part of the DSP exploration that we're going to be seeing in the middle of December, because they do have a pilot that's initiated for the phase one implementation of the VPP. And so certainly, exploration of what those contracts might look like through the aggregators and that sort of a system, particularly as it relates to the phase two, which is really that distribution-based dispatch. But I think when I think of what you're talking about here, Mr. Chairman, is company-owned resources, company investment into energy storage. You're talking about specifically resources on the distribution system. That's a distribution, capacity procurement project, which, is really focused on utility initiated purchases. I think that, it could also be private purchases. It could be aggregated. But
isn't it all three though? Doesn't it avoid generation, transmission, and distribution? And you could, if you identify the zones, you could do it through third-party bids, or the company can do it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that what we're talking about primarily is a differentiation between sort of BTM and behind the meter resources and in front of the meter resources, but not exclusively, but also not a part of a larger, aggregated VPP model. This is sort of more driven by, a specific procurement on the distribution system. But, one of the things that I think, this kind of a DCP sort of proposal could do is accelerate the value of the phase two VPP implementation, because really having that distribution-based value and that distribution-based dispatch, it requires a number of communications components on the utility side as it relates to the distribution system, but it also requires a certain density of resources on the distribution system in order to actually achieve the values that you would get from a distribution-based dispatch. And whereas if you're on the bulk system dispatch, you can pull from all over the system really to get that, bulk peak, but you're talking about a few events or small, much fewer events than you would have on a distribution system based thing, but you need that density on the distribution system. And you could do that organically through the market as, different aggregators participate in that marketplace. But you could also accelerate it through some sort of a distribution capacity procurement that maybe it's open to the utility and other, third-party investments. But, something that I think that could really change, the perspective of what we're looking at in, the ERP overall. And I really think it's a critical component, and would really love to hear what the company's perspective is on that kind of approach.
I guess the only thing I'd add is if you're looking at the high side of distribution transformers, you could be looking at 50 megawatt type battery storage projects that are dispatched as part of the bulk power system, but avoid distribution, transmission, and generation. And maybe it has to be on the low side. I don't know, but like you say, it'd be nice to hear the company's view. I guess with that, Mr. Eden, I think I'd propose that you try and draft up an order in the coming days and weeks. We ask the parties to give us their thoughts by December 4th, and we bring this back in early to mid-December. Would you say that any different?
No, I think that's a good approach to set a deadline for the parties by December 4th to respond to the commission's thoughts, as well as any of their own thoughts about supplemental direct. And then at a later date, maybe on December 11th or the 18th, like you already mentioned, the commission could finalize the exact parameters of the supplemental direct requirements. In addition, on that December 4th filing deadline, we would also recommend that Public Service confer with the other parties about at least the beginning of a procedural schedule, and specifically the appropriate discovery methods and the appropriate supplemental direct deadline. So that the deadline that Public Service would be required to comply with these supplemental directives, which again won't be finalized until approximately December 11th. We also think that it makes sense, given that we don't know at this point the cross docket concerns that you mentioned, Chair, regarding the Denver Metro CPCN and the DSP. Those proceedings are anticipated to be filed in mid-December. And so given that we might need additional cross docket coordination on those proceedings, we would recommend that the parties address if they have any suggestions, but delay making a decision on that until after we are able to see those filings.
That makes sense to me, Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
And then going back for a second to the completeness issue, I won't go through the entire list this
Please
morning,
don't.
but yeah, as an example, one of the directives was for the company to prepare a standalone portfolio examining that where transmission costs were minimized by increasing resources interconnecting to the Denver metro area. As you know, the company has proposed this new transmission adder and credit system that penalizes or rewards system generation within the Denver metro. But from our initial review, it hasn't proposed a standalone portfolio that complies with that directive. Again, we don't think that's a reason to hold off on the completeness determination. Another example directive is that the commission required the company to address in its phase one how it intends to resolve modeling issues such as the reliability rubric and the transparency regarding strategic locational value of certain gas resources. Again, Commissioner Gilman and the rest of you have already discussed how that would be good fodder for supplemental direct testimony to figure out more precisely how to ensure that bidders are aware about the locational value of certain gas resources, and we wouldn't recommend deeming the application incomplete for failure to fully comply with that directive here. Regardless, our recommendation is still to make a decision today about completeness and to address any omissions in supplemental direct testimony. We're also happy, however, to bring this back next week for the commission to have a more robust discussion about all of the directives.
Yeah, given that I share Commissioner Gilman's concerns, I'd like to see your list of issues that weren't addressed, and let's take it up next week. I'm not prepared to vote on complete lists now, given where Commissioner Gilman was coming from. So let's take that up next week.
Okay, we will do that. In addition, and this was already addressed at some point by Commissioner Gilman's questioning about the independent emissions monitor in the 2021 ERP-CEP. We had the CDPHE verifying that. As opposed to supplemental direct, though, and to be clear, we would recommend directing Public Service to confer with the parties regarding this topic. Specifically, is there going to be an independent emissions evaluator, and then submit a conferral report about that topic in its December 4th filing. So we would not wait until supplemental direct. We would want to hear from the company on December 4th.
Yeah, that makes sense, Commissioner Gilman.
better detail than I had, but yes, I'd like the response as soon as possible. Thanks.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
And then the last cleanup item, I would say, and again, this has already been discussed by your earlier conversation, but the phase 2 decision in the 2021 ERP and CEP directed staff to initiate a stakeholder process to develop a scope of work for hiring an independent transmission analyst, or ITA. Staff doesn't mention this in its intervention. And so again, we would recommend that the commission require staff to address this on December 4th, so that when the commission subsequently comes back and finalizes supplemental direct testimony, you have more of that information about how the ITA is going to play out.
I'm good with that. Commissioner Goen,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
All right, Mr. Eden, I think that interim decision could be ABC. Does that give you what you need?
I guess one clarifying question is, do you want this ABC decision to discuss the supplemental direct topics that were in your discussion today?
No, I would not. I think it's like a draft internal order that is circulated among the 3 commissioners with council making sure we're compliant with the open meetings law. And then we take it up whenever December 11th or 18th.
Okay, so this ABC decision coming out of today's meeting will focus on setting that December 4th deadline and the procedures going forth for how to finalize a supplemental direct.
Yeah, and you'll hopefully internally get us a written version of what each of us said, and you'll have my script.
Right. Yes, we can definitely do that. And again, I think hearing feedback from the party on December 4th will further enhance the commission's thinking about this.
Yeah, and I mean, you can almost imagine that internal order like sort of a TBC process that'll almost certainly be subject to another discussion at a future CWM.
Right. Okay. I think that gives me what I need.
Commissioner Gilman, final thoughts before we adjourn?
Nothing additional. Thanks, Mr. Eden. Another marathon.
Thanks.
We're in for another several years.
Commissioner Plan. Can you end on a happier note?
No, I'm devastated. I have nothing to add. Thanks.
All right. Thanks all. With that, we're adjourned. See you next time.